there was a Tony Iommi solo album in 2000. They finally let him make an album called IOMMI, the record company. All right. And this was what the Dep Sessions was supposed to be.
Okay.
His album between Seventh Star and the Dep Sessions, Tony's been trying to put out a solo album since 1987. And he finally gets one out in 2000, I guess. And it was recorded between 1996 and 2000. Like I said, originally this was going to be, the IOMMI solo album was going to be the Dep Sessions. At least that's the way I remember it. Wikipedia may have a different perspective on it, but you know, back in the day when I was following this stuff as someone who was an avid fan, it was like Tony Iommi was going to put out a solo album with Glenn Hughes. And then we hear nothing, and then it never happens. And then we get the bootleg Eighth Star, which was the tracks from eventually the Dep Sessions. And all of a sudden, later on, it was like, oh, Iommi's solo album's coming out. And the record company said, we'll let you do a solo album, but you've got to use all of the, like, the modern musicians of the day instead of the guys you would, you know, instead of having Glenn Hughes and your normal cast of characters, right? You're getting... Pretty
amazing that even at this point in his career, he still couldn't, you know...
Tell the record company to fuck themselves? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a really good album, but if Tony had been able to make this, I mean, so here are the people who are the vocalists on this album. Henry Rollins, Skin, Dave Grohl, Phil Anselmo, Serge Tankian, Billy Corgan, Ian Astbury, Peter Steele, Ozzy, and Billy Idol. Okay, these are the vocalists on this album. And this is, like I said, between the late 90s and 2000. Now imagine if Tony had been able to make an album, a solo album with, like, say, Bruce Dickinson, Jeff Tate, Ronnie Dio, Ozzy, Rob Halford, all of the great metal singers. If he had been able to do that, I think it would have been an interesting thing as well. But I mean, the choices here are obviously driven by who was popular in that time frame. And I'm not saying Tony didn't like these guys; he probably did. But it's a very different album in that every track is different.
The singers are all over the place.
Yep, and you know the common denominator is Tony. And it still works, and the songs are really good, and the production is terrific, and every one of these guys was dying to do a track with Tony Iommi, especially like Henry Rollins. Henry Rollins is like one of the biggest Sabbath fans of all time. You see him on all these videos when they talk about all the great metal bands and stuff. Every time they talk about Sabbath, they cut to Henry Rollins because he is like the biggest Sabbath fan on the planet. So all of these guys wanted to work with him. Dave Grohl, who is the biggest fanboy of all time, right? But, you know, you have a lot of people on this album who were, you know, big names at that time. And it was sort of, to me, it looked like something that a record company would have organized.
Yeah.
You know?
They did something similar with Slash a couple of years later where he made an album with a whole bunch of different singers on each track.
Right. Right. So, I mean, as having said that, and having been sort of initially disappointed that this wasn't the kind of vocalists that I wanted to hear on an Iommi solo album, I will say this is a really good album and it stands up. And there's some interesting things on here and some fun things on here.
Brian May's on there too. Yep.
You don't really notice him very much, but he's on there. And so you've got Matt Cameron on drums on some of the tracks. Bill Ward played on the track with Ozzy. That's like going home. It's funny. It's like there's a song called Who's Fooling Who, and it's like as soon as Ozzy chirps in with his voice on this thing, it's like all of a sudden you're home. And it sounds like, I mean, you've got Bill Ward and you've got Ozzy. I don't know what Geezer was that day, but that sounds like, you know, a Sabbath track. everything else sounds like Tony with other guys, but it's really pretty good. And some really interesting kinds of takes on stuff. But to me, at that point in history, I wanted to hear the Glenn Hughes album with Tony Iommi, and I got this instead. And so I still like it. I still think these are good songs. It's still Tony being Tony, and all of the hallmarks that Tony's playing are all over this thing. It's a good resume for him in some respects. If you want to hear all of his guitar style and all of his guitar techniques, it's all over this, because everybody did a different kind of track with him. But it's a really good album.
What are some standout tracks for you on this one?
The riff on Meat is fantastic. I reviewed this album on my website too, as a sort of an exercise in like doing what I called a music appreciation review.
Yeah, link in description.
I mean, the Henry Rollins track is really good and up tempo, but he's not very melodic. There's this incredible riff on this track by this chick Skin called Meat. Goodbye Lament is kind of like, it's very Nirvana-ish. It's with Dave Grohl, but it's very Nirvana-ish. Time Is Mine is Phil Anselmo, is very Pantera-ish. Black Oblivion is Billy Corgan, and that's one of those songs that takes a shitload of twists and turns. Billy Corgan wanted to be on one of those songs that had a load of time signature changes and stuff in it like that. One of the best songs is Just Say No to Love with Peter Steele, who was on vocals. And he has this really deep, dark voice, and it's really creepy.
Jealous black and envy green, low and light and left you queen, rotted flesh and broken bones, place your ass upon the throne. Just say no to
And then you have the Ozzy track, which I said, like, it sounds like you're going home. And then you have this one with Billy Idol on it called Into the Night, which is a lot of fun. And vocally, it's hilarious.
Billy Idol is a guilty pleasure of mine.
I don't have anything bad to say about Billy Idol, but it was an interesting choice having him. But this is an interesting album. I like this album better than anything I heard of the Tony Martin era.